powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. The guys have been counting down to training camp, which is 12 days away. 12 days until the Eagles report to training camp. I know when Andrew DiCecco hears that, he probably smiles thinking about the start of training camp for the Eagles for another season. But Andrew's a guy who loves the offseason, the draft, putting it all together, and has a long depth of knowledge about the entire league. That's why we do our division previews every Thursday with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. This week we look at the AFC West, your champion, the Kansas City Chiefs. They are, of course, the defending Super Bowl champions, 14-3. The Chargers, 10-7. The Raiders, 6-11 last season. And in last place, it was the Denver Broncos at 5-12. So how will it all shake out? We're about to take a look with Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash Live. Our division previews continue. 12 days, Andrew. What's going on, buddy?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
All is good, my man. As we get ready for Eagles training camp, we're continuing to look at the other teams around the league. Let's start at the top. First place in the AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs. They are the defending champions. And, you know, when you take a look at this team, not a lot has changed here. This is a lot of the same characters coming back. And obviously Patrick Mahomes, you got Pacheco at running back who kind of burst onto the scene. Kadarius Toney, they made that trade. It still seems like this offense is going to be pretty tough to stop.
Yeah, Andy Reid is still in place. You have Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo coaching the defense. Anytime you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, obviously he's going to be perennially in the conversation to be league MVP. You mentioned Pacheco, the running back. Jerick McKinnon's a player who I got to speak to in Arizona at the Super Bowl. I thought he had a really good season as a pass catcher and a good complementary running back to what they already have. He's an interesting player. You can move him around. Wide receiver Sky Moore, he should be able to take a leap here in year two. Kadarius Toney's a former first-round pick. He struggled with injuries, but we all remember the punt return that he had in the Super Bowl, so he's electric with the ball in his hands. So interested to see what he can do with the full offseason there. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling is always a good deep threat, and they drafted a guy named Rashee Rice, who I liked for a number of years now, out of SMU in the second round. So I think that he will be able to work his way into the rotation there and take some snaps. The offensive line, they have a couple of competent components there, and Donovan Smith, Creed Humphrey, Jawan Taylor. Obviously, Travis Kelce is an all-world tight end, and the offense continues to run through him.
Yeah, that offense, very, very deep, very talented. And, of course, you got Mahomes. He makes everybody better. But their defense is really good. Chris Jones might be a top 5 player in the league. George Karlaftis, who they drafted last year. Nick Bolton, another guy that they got in the draft. This is more than just Patrick Mahomes in the offense.
Yeah, you mentioned Karlaftis, Chris Jones, who had probably the best season, probably the only defensive tackle that had a better season than, I guess you can say Quentin Williams too, but Javon Hargrave was right up there with those guys. They brought in Charles Omenihu. They have Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill as a reserve linebacker who started a lot of games, so he provides good depth. And their secondary is really interesting. Jalen Watson is a player who has emerged. I talked to him at the Super Bowl. L'Jarius Sneed's one of the better young corners in football. Trent McDuffie's a good nickel player, physical, scrappy inside. And then they have Justin Reed and Brian Cook as your safety. So a really well-rounded defense, and I'm interested to see how Steve Spagnuolo is able to work and build around some of the different components that they've added, because they do have some depth there this season to work around.
Talk with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, the AFC West. Let's go to the Chargers, 10-7 last year. Everybody always loves this team. Justin Herbert, Eckler. You still have the two guys, Allen, Williams, and obviously that offense, it's all Herbert, and he makes things go. But kind of diversity with Eckler there. When you see this Chargers offense, it's everybody always thinks of Herbert, but what's kind of the personality of that Charger offense to you?
I mean, I think Austin Eckler is really going to be a key factor for their offense this year. But you look at Kellen Moore, and I think to me their offensive coordinator is going to be instrumental in getting the most out of Justin Herbert. He's flirting around with top 5, top 6 or 7 quarterback in the league, depending on who you ask. I think he is a top 5 talent. But I do think that this is the year where he's going to put it all together and be the player that, he's offered glimpses, but I think that this is the year under Kellen Moore and his tutelage and some of the weapons that they have. I think that you're going to see him take a leap forward. I mentioned Austin Eckler. He's electric, do-it-all running back. Got to stay healthy, but I think that he's a player that could feasibly be in the conversation for Offensive Player of the Year, given the components around him and the coaching staff. Gerald Everett's a very athletic tight end, not a world beater. He's sort of is what he is. He kind of reminds me of Jared Cook, who's sort of been around a lot, athletic guy, but he's able to give you confident snaps there. The receiving core: Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, who they drafted this year. He should be able to get some snaps and help them. A big-bodied guy that I think can help from a possession standpoint. They also have Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton, but they're more spot players. Jalen Guyton has some wheels and can really stretch a defense. So I really like what they have there.
All right, on the defensive side of the ball for the Chargers, of course, people forget they have a defensive-minded head coach, and I don't think when we think of the Chargers, defense sometimes jumps out. But Joey Bosa, Eric Kendricks, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., it sounds like they've got a pretty darn good defense there.
Yeah, particularly at linebacker. You mentioned Khalil Mack, Kenneth Murray, Eric Kendricks, Joey Bosa, who I've always liked, and there's a couple of seasons there where I thought that he was going to be a threat for Defensive Player of the Year. Asante Samuel in secondary. Derwin James is probably the best do-it-all safety in football. Very rangy, athletic player that you can match up over tight ends and move them around formations. So I like the Chargers defense, and I think that obviously having a defensive-minded head coach should be able to put all the pieces together now that you have, especially I really like what they've done at linebacker. So I think that that'll be an interesting thing to monitor moving forward.
Yeah, that Chargers team, always high expectations. We'll see if they can finally meet those expectations this year. Justin Herbert now entering his fourth season as well for that Chargers offense. They were 10-7 last year. We take a look at the Oakland Raiders, who obviously made a big change.
Vegas Raiders.
That's right. You're right. Vegas Raiders. Sorry. Vegas Raiders, who made a big change at quarterback. So let's start with that. The quarterback change, obviously going from Carr to Garoppolo, we think. How is that all going to work out?
That's a downgrade, in my opinion. I think that Derek Carr is one of the more underrated passers in the league, and I think that he will thrive from a change of scenery. It just wasn't working out, whatever the reason was, but Jimmy G is more of a really spotty player. I don't know that he's somebody that can command an offense, somebody that is going to – I think he needs a lot of things around him to be ideal for him to thrive, right? I don't think he's someone that can necessarily create. So I think that they're going to have a lot of they're going to be one of those teams that you scratch your head because I think they're going to look good one week and then lose to an opponent in which they shouldn't. But Josh Jacobs is a player who I think the offense is going to have to run through given the inefficiency at quarterback or the sporadic play, I should say, from the quarterback position that they have there. I like their tight end situation. Austin Hooper, Michael Mayer, who they drafted in the second round in April. They also have O.J. Howard there as well, former first-round pick with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers several years back. I think their offensive line is going to struggle a little bit. They do have Colton Miller there and Dylan Parham, one of their guards, who I liked a bit coming out of the draft. I'm overly impressed with that, and I think that's also going to contribute to their offensive inefficiencies.
Yeah, you said it, take a step back. Garoppolo, he does win a lot, but can he win with this Raiders offense? You mentioned Jacobs, Devontae Adams. I mean, Adams had a monster year. Renfro's really good. We'll see if he can keep that offense going at a high power. But, Garoppolo's been one of those kind of tough guys to figure out. A lot of wins, but not a lot of production. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball for the Raiders. Crosby obviously kind of stands out on that side of the ball. Marcus Epps, he's coming from Philadelphia over to Vegas now. Jerry Tillery is a veteran here. But when you look at the Vegas defense, is this a playoff defense?
I still don't think it is, especially when I look at the secondary. But their defensive line certainly can hold up with the best of them. You mentioned Max Crosby. Jerry Tillery is a former first-round pick with the Chargers some years ago. Chandler Jones has perennially been an underrated player at each of his stops. And can't forget that they drafted Tyree Wilson in the first round as well. They're a little small at linebacker. Divine Diablo was a converted safety from Virginia Tech. one of those more rangy type of players, kind of a slighter build of a Kaiser White, if you can sort of envision that. And Robert Spillane, who was a special team standout with the Steelers, really big hitter, physical player, but I think he's only runs about 225 or something like that. So they're a little light on that second level. And the corner situation, I mean, I know David Long is over there now from the Rams. They have Amick Robertson, who's more of he's a smaller type of player, but just not a lot there. I mean, their safeties are pretty good, and Epps is a steady, reliable player, as those who watched the Eagles last season are well aware of. And Trayvon Moehrig is a player from TCU coming out of the draft that I like quite a bit, but they don't have a lot there on the back end that really excites me.
Yeah, this is a team that might take a step back from 6-11. We'll see what happens to the Vegas Raiders. And then I think maybe the most compelling team, maybe in football. Let's talk about Sean Payton's Denver Broncos, and let's start with him. How about Sean Payton? What do you think he will add to a team that went 5-12 last year?
Well, he's a veteran head coach. He's won a Super Bowl. He can command a room, and he's coached at the highest level. And I think that there's a certain element of respect there that he's going to command. And he seems to get the most out of the rosters that he's had. I mean, that 2009 Saints team, I don't think before going into that season that many envisioned them being a Super Bowl team, but sure enough, they were. And there's other examples that I thought that he maximized the talent on his roster. And I think that he's going to be really instrumental in getting Russell Wilson back to the level that he was at. Maybe not quite the level that he was at with the Seahawks, but certainly not the player of last season that he looked like a shell of himself. I think that was probably a bit of an aberration. I think that you're going to see an improved Russell Wilson this year under Joe Lombardi. And they also brought over Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph is there. So I think that he's somebody that's going to be able to really take the reins there and get that defense playing at a higher level.
Yeah, so Wilson obviously had a down year last year. Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, he's got some talent there. KJ Hamler, they drafted him a couple years ago. There are seemingly some weapons there with this offense, so can Peyton take this up? Because their defense, we'll get to, is really good, but can the offense hold up their end of the bargain? How much of an improvement do we see there?
Well, I mean, you also have to take into account that Javonte Williams is coming off a serious injury. I really like him, and I think that he's going to be a key player in moving that offense forward. We'll have to see where he's at throughout the summer and monitor his progress, but he's a player that I really like. And also their tight end, Greg Dulcich. I thought that last season there were opportunities for him to really anoint himself as one of the better tight ends in football. I thought that he, along with the rest of the offense, sort of just went by the wayside, but I think this year you'll see him sort of establish himself as one of the preeminent players at the position. They also have Chris Manhertz, who was with the Jaguars, really good blocking tight end. So I think that they complement each other pretty well. Receivers, you mentioned Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick's a player who I really like. Steady player, not really flashy, but Cam Sutton's still there. They drafted Marvin Mims in the second round out of Oklahoma. And then on the offensive line, have guys like Mike McGlinchey at right tackle, Lynn Maynard's at right guard, and I think, Garrett Bowles is still there as well. So, I mean, their offense should be vastly improved than what we saw last season.
All right, their offense vastly improved. Their defense really good. They were one of the best defenses in the league last year, even though they went 5-12. And there's a lot of names: Patrick Surtain, Randy Gregory. They got Frank Clark. Old Eagle on this team, Alex Singleton, has done a nice job there. So this is a team, Justin Simmons. I mean, I'm sure you'll start sprouting off more. This is one of the better defenses in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, Zach Allen coming over from the Cardinals, I think he kind of got lost because he was with Arizona and they were a middling team. But I think coming to Denver, you'll see him really announce his presence. He's a player that can really move around the defensive line and help you out from different alignments. Linebacker, you mentioned Alex Singleton. He averages like 15 tackles a game, it seems like. He's always among the league leaders in tackles, along with T.J. Edwards. So, and Josie Jewell's there, Randy Gregory, Frank Clark. They drafted Drew Sanders in the third round out of Cincinnati, and I really liked him. He was a player that was rising up draft boards consistently throughout within 2 weeks from the draft. So, I think that he'll have the luxury of not having to be thrown in there too early and have a chance to develop, because he's going to be a good player. Defensive back, Pat Surtain's my favorite corner in football right now, I would say. And just the arrows trending up with him. I think that he's yet to scratch the surface on what he can do. Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, the veteran safety tandem. And sneaky addition on their back end, and he had a cup of coffee with the Eagles maybe 3-4 years ago. Tremont Smith on kick return. I think their special team should be improved as well.
Andrew DiCecco, AFC West. All right, let's break it down, buddy. Kansas City 14-3, Chargers 10-7, Oakland 6-11, Denver 5-12 last year. How do you see the AFC West shaking out in 2023?
I like the Chiefs, then the Chargers, and the Broncos, and the Raiders.
So a duplicate of the top two and a flip-flop of the bottom. Denver goes from 4-3, Kansas City 1, Chargers at number 2. There you go. The AFC West, we preview that next week. We'll be getting into the NFC, and then the Eagles will begin camp on the 25th. We'll be doing the rest of the NFC with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com, and make sure you check out their previews of the Eagles. They have 7 questions that they've answered so far over at InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew and Jeff going back and forth on those. I've really liked those segments there, and he, of course, will be back next Thursday right here on the Sports Best. All right, my man, enjoy it.
You as well. Talk soon.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, always helpful on those division previews. I mean, he knows these rosters inside and out, man. He's got Kansas City 1, Chargers 2, Denver 3.